human soul. For thousands of years, it has been the greatest and most intimate mystery of mankind. From ancient civilizations to the present day, almost every culture of the world has held to the belief that hidden within the human form, there lay a spark of the divine, an immortal soul that is released when the physical body dies and is reunited with God. But throughout the ages, there have also been many who claim that heaven can be reached on earth, that it is possible to experience the world of the divine, not in death, but in life. They are called the Mystics. Mystics are believed to be able to travel beyond the boundaries of ordinary consciousness into higher realms of reality. Though hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated, mysticism encircles the world and to this day has its place in the great religions. In the Taoist religion of China, mystics of the yogic tradition of Qigong cultivate a vital energy force within themselves to ignite their consciousness to higher levels of awareness.
What you are attempting to do in Taoist yoga is to create another body, an energy body.
In Judaism, rabbinical mystics seek an understanding of God through the ancient wisdom of Kabbalah.
God wanted that we should be able to draw that essence of essences into a physical plane and thereby transform the physical into something more spiritual.
Monks of the Christian Hesychast tradition dedicate their lives to a state of inner silence to experience the divine light of God.
This is something from the divine world. It is not a fantasy. It is a gift from the divine world.
The yogis of Hinduism and Sikhism strive to achieve a state of pure enlightenment through the practice of Kundalini Yoga.
You and God are one. Or in other words, yoga, union with the self, is the true nature.
Among the Muslims, the Sufis seek to create an intimate union between themselves and their God, Allah.
It's as if yourself, your soul, was a drop of water, and the goal was to return that drop of water to the ocean from which it originally emerged.
Though these traditions differ culturally, they follow a similar path to the world of the divine. But getting there is no easy task, as danger lurks at every step.
It is potentially dangerous. Well, it is a very intense doctrine, and it does require a certain psychic stability to go to such limits of the mind.
The roots of mysticism predate religion itself, stemming back to the dawn of man, when tribal shaman of the earth entered altered states of consciousness, traveling to other realms at will, and interacted with spiritual entities in order to heal the sick or give guidance to their tribe.
Shamanism gave birth to both mysticism and religion. In terms of mysticism, there would be shamanic traditions that would require knowledge learned from a shaman given to an apprentice on how to enter the lower world or enter the upper world. On the other hand, there would be dogma, there would be information, facts that would be understood about what these traditions were. And in time, there would be sort of a split. Those who knew the dogma would basically give birth to a religion. Those who knew the true mystical traditions continued their shamanic work, and in time, as mankind grew and evolved, gave birth to what we call mysticism.
Throughout time, mystics of every culture have journeyed to the world of the divine and back again, often returning with similar blueprints of the hidden life of the soul, secret techniques to unleash extraordinary powers of the mind and body, and maps that show the way on the mortal's path to God. Throughout the ages, mystics of the world have walked the razor's edge of reality to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. For the mystic, the world behind their eyes is infinitely more real than the world before their eyes. Now, at the dawn of the new millennium, people who feel unfulfilled with the rituals of modern religion are rediscovering the ancient mystical traditions. On the path of Sufism, Sufis strive to follow in the footsteps of the patriarch of Islam itself, the Prophet Muhammad, who in 610 AD had the first of many mystical experiences. These divine revelations were collected and recorded in the holy book of the Muslims, the Quran. From the oasis cities in the Arabian desert, the call of the Quran echoed throughout the Arab world, and the religion of Islam spread forth with electrifying speed.
Islam is fascinating in that it begins very much as a religious tradition that describes humanity's relationships with God in terms of the Lord-servant relationship, that humans are clearly God's creation, but that in no way do they have any equality with the divine. The divine is totally other. So you find in the Quran many articulations of this distance, the transcendence of Allah, of the divine. What you find, however, within 200 years of Muhammad's death is the beginnings of the articulation of a movement that argues, is there any way to bridge this gap between the human and the divine? And in fact, they go back to the Quran to find some very interesting verses and passages that in their minds illustrate that this intimacy actually can exist.
Those who desire to come close to please their Creator, these are people of the path. And they have them in every tradition. So every tradition, you might say, has its mystic heart of lovers. In Islam, this mystic heart of lovers is called Sufism.
The goal of the Sufi is none other than God himself. And though all Muslims believe that it's possible to become close to God after death, the Sufis believe that it is possible to cross this holy divide while one is still alive.
So this recognition of the potential for intimacy was really the catalyst for the gradual evolution of a highly complicated spiritual practice and spiritual philosophy, beginning in the 700s and down really to the modern period.
To this day, within the secret rites of zikr, the Sufis engage in ecstatic dancing and powerful chants to reach a trance-like state, in which it is said that their soul guides them closer and closer to God.
The soul of every person is the ruh, is that breath of God, is that essence of God in creation. And that ruh is what brings us back to our source, is, you might say, our guiding light.
Within the mystical traditions of the Christian world, one of the most profound paths of transcendence is that of the hesychast.
The perfect hesychast is Jesus hanging silent on the cross, dead, totally in the presence of God.
Hesychasm began to take root in the 4th century A.D., when a community of Christian monks banded together and founded a spiritual refuge in the far reaches of the Middle Eastern desert. These early mystics were known as the Holy Desert Fathers.
The flight into the desert is to recapture, I think, the strict apostolic life, and through ascesis or ascetical struggles, to take away all that is a conflict in one's inner life, and get to the very, very essential fundamentals of Christianity.
Far from the disturbances of the outside world, these ascetic monks developed a method of ceaseless prayer to purify the mind, eventually leading to a state of Hezekiah, inner silence.
The teaching usually is if you're humble and you're really desiring reality and you really are quieting yourself down to focus, to become aware of what's happening, to contemplate, which simply means to see things clearly, then the claim is God's own Holy Spirit will help you and will guide you and will even pray within you and will unite your mind and your heart with the Spirit of God and with God, God's self, with the very God.
When the Christian church split between the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches in the 11th century, Catholicism rejected the hesychast tradition, which encouraged individual experiences with God. Though Orthodoxy embraced this mystical path, and to this day has preserved its sacred teachings. But hesychasm was nearly lost to the world, and for centuries was shrouded in obscurity.
The teachings were scattered. The mystical references were scattered from book to book, you see. And this is to prevent, the unworthy who were not ready for certain teachings.
But behind the walls of the Orthodox monasteries in Eastern Europe, the ancient tradition survived, and with it, a greater understanding for the essence of Christian orthodoxy.
The whole aspect of the Orthodox Church is mysticism. It is based on intuition, on insight, on divine illumination. So these things are not new. These things are there in the Holy Fathers if one knows how to find them.
Throughout its history, the traditional Taoist religion of China has had many roads of expression. As a communal religion, its emphasis lay in the moral teachings of the individual and the state. Yet there is another, more esoteric path, called Qigong, which is said to propel the mystic's consciousness to directly experience the Tao.
Tao is a word. It translates as the way. But to try and understand the Tao itself is impossible. Tao is beyond understanding. Tao is beyond words. But I guess the best way to conceptualize it would be sort of like the canvas on which the universe is painted. Reality that underlies all of reality.
To experience the divine realm of the Tao, practitioners of Qigong use the mind, breath, and movement of the body to activate an invisible energy or life force called Qi.
If we liken Qi to sort of atoms, we know that everything is made of Qi, beating at different frequencies. It's all energy.
So the Chinese came to look at Qi as the life force.
The practice of Qigong can be traced back to remote areas of China, where Taoist mystics sought to increase their Qi and keep it flowing freely throughout their long days of seated meditation. Infusing techniques of the martial arts, these early energy exercises evolved into a philosophy of movement called Tai Chi Chuan, By the 15th century, Tai Chi Chuan had developed into a series of intricate movements to directly tap into the universal Qi and absorb this celestial energy into the body. Tai Chi Chuan is still widely practiced today for its rejuvenating powers. Yet there is still a more secret, mystical Qigong method that is only known to a few. It is called Metan, or in the West, Taoist Yoga.
In Taoist yoga, you learn to move energy or Qi inside of the body. Learning to circulate it. Learning to try and feel that there is actually something there and not just your imagination. Because generally when you first start studying, it feels like your imagination. But after a while, you start feeling that, yes, there's really something moving. A very popular Taoist phrase is, that which was false becomes real, and that which was real becomes false. So that things that you thought were impossible become possible.
Since its earliest beginnings, the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah has been cloaked in secrecy. Today, exploration into Kabbalah has not dimmed, and the ancient texts remain faithful guides to seekers of the divine. Though the true inner essence of these mystical teachings remain a mystery.
The Kabbalah is an oral tradition that has been transmitted through the generations in a chain that is unbroken. According to some Kabbalists, going back to Moses at Sinai, according to other Kabbalists, even going back to Adam in the Garden of Eden. But one can't really know the Kabbalah unless one receives it from a master.
The earliest known Kabbalistic texts are dated back to medieval times, when the first schools of Jewish mysticism began to take shape in France and northern Spain. These texts propounded what would be the central doctrine of Jewish mysticism, the 10 Sfirot. To the Kabbalist, God is described as Ein Sof, the endless, infinite, and unknowable. But God projects from himself 10 Sfirot, or channels of energy by which his divine essences can be known.
Knowledge of the Sfirot, which was to impart to an individual knowledge of God's nature, also had an impact on the understanding of one's own soul. So the ascent to the divine was an ascent of consciousness, or alternatively expressed, it's a journey deeper into oneself.
God wanted that we should be able to draw that essence of essences into a physical plane and thereby transform the physical into something more spiritual, to something connected to God.
India has forever been seen as a land of mystery. Legends of yogis possessing supernatural power and divine wisdom have abounded throughout its history. The Hindus of India have long known the power of yoga, though its origins have been long lost in a sea of time. The earliest known literary source of yoga dates back to 2500 BC, within the vast collection of Hindu scriptures called the Vedas. But it was not until the 6th century BC when a later treatise of this body of work, the Upanishads, provided the main foundation of yogic philosophy.
The Upanishads are very idealistic, very conceptual, beautiful, elevated philosophy. But there's no practical method to attain that unity which the Upanishads are speaking of. So after the Upanishads, then come the Yoga Sutras, which is a practical method using the body, the mind, condensing or focusing the body and mind towards achieving that aim which is spoken about in the Upanishads.
To yoga is to unite, is union. Letting the divisions between ourselves and God, ourselves and the universe, just melt away.
Over the centuries, yoga separated into particular styles and methods of practice. Great adepts began to probe the hidden potential of the human body, and a new breed of masters emerged. These ancient Indian mystics developed a system of yoga to ignite a divine energy within themselves, which would raise their awareness to heavenly spheres. This mystical form of breath and movement has survived the winds of time. It is called Kundalini Yoga.
Kundalini is that which takes you from darkness to light, that which takes you on your path with God.
So when the Kundalini keeps raising, then the reality for that individual becomes immense.
Before embarking on this spiritual journey, maps are needed to guide the mystic's consciousness through the realm of the divine. Maps that can be found only within the mystic himself. Throughout history, mystics have traveled many roads to enter into an experience of the divine. Though these mystical traditions differ culturally, all roads eventually meet at the same destination, within the mystic himself.
God, when he creates each human, he breathes into that individual part of his own spirit, his ruh. No other being in creation possessed that. Interestingly, the myth of the fall of Satan involves, in fact, God putting this new human before this great angelic being and saying, you have to bow before this human. And Iblis says, well, why should I bow? I'm this great fiery angel, and this human is this fragile nothing that will pass away. What he didn't see was that divine spark within the human being.
It is that divinity that is in us. It is the God-man that we are striving to be.
We are God, that, God lies within all of us.
The human mirrors the divine, and the divine mirrors the human.
So we have the divine breath within us, and we have the divine attributes within us. But we must work to bring them out. We must work to reveal them.
The path of mysticism leads the seeker to the highest levels of human consciousness, though the journey begins within the body itself.
As far as hesychasm is concerned, what we're working on in the physical body, and this is a gift from God too, the gift from God, is to bring the physical body, to make of it a resurrected body.
The Sufi path, the path of the dervish, is not to leave the human body. Our goal is to live in the human body, but to live in it as divine, to totally transform it into a divine body.
Within yoga, this body and mind system is a highly refined vehicle. It can take us to the source of the universe.
In the Taoist tradition, you are using the body and parts of the body to power you to higher levels.
On the one hand, in the Kabbalah see the body is problematic, right? And it's a hindrance or an obstacle. So you have to control the body in order to attain the higher states of spiritual enlightenment. But on the other hand, the body is a very positive thing because it's the map of the divine.
To journey through the crossroads between the physical world and the world of the spirit, the mystic must first find this inner map of the divine for safe voyage through the dark caverns of consciousness. Over thousands of years, the mystical schools of the world have developed these inner spiritual maps, along with ancient techniques to unlock the powers of human perception. Strange and beautiful practices of devotion, movement, meditation, and prayer have found their way across the oceans of time. The ancient mystical tradition of hesychasm is still practiced today in the Orthodox monasteries throughout the world, with the largest community of mystics practicing on the Greek peninsula, Mount Athos.
It's a difficult path. It's a very difficult path, I think, even for many monks. A true quietness, a true tranquility in the modern world is, if not impossible, is an extraordinarily difficult path to follow.
The path of a Christian hesychast is devoted to purifying the mind and body through continual meditation and prayer. Hesychasts pray ceaselessly, reciting what is called the Jesus Prayer over and over again, until the whole of their consciousness becomes the prayer itself.
It's involved with a breathing in on, we'll say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, and then an exhalation on, have mercy on me, a sinner. This would be used to free the mind of all extraneous thoughts, and therefore the subconscious is raised to the level of the divine consciousness. And this is our struggle in the spiritual life.
Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, I sin.
By saying, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, we have invoked the divine name.
So the name, the words have a power in them. In the 14th century, there was a huge controversy called the Controversy of the Holy Hesychasts, where these monks of Mount Athos claimed that by repeating the name of Jesus with the breathing, that they actually had a palpable experience of God, that they actually really came to know the light of God, the uncreated light of God. And then some more scholastic type people, or more, you might say, philosophical or whatever, they were saying this is impossible. God is totally simple. You can't have an experience of God. God is beyond everything. You can have some thoughts about God or analogies, but you can't really experience the presence of God. Well, the hesychast said, oh no, that when you pray and your heart is pure, Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, they will see God. You actually have a kind of a vision of the presence of God. It's not just analogous to something. There's something really going on here that they claim is really true, and they're ready to die for it. You know, they're ready to say, yeah, we know there is God, and we have been caught up in His glory.
Like the Christian hesychasts, Jewish mystics of Kabbalah use divine names and secret practices of meditation and prayer, which have been closely guarded for centuries.
There's no question that even to this very day, the traditional Kabbalists are very, very cautious about certain aspects of the tradition, even though it is the case now that we find more and more of these texts available, and there are courses being offered on Kabbalah by people who know the tradition. Still, there are certain aspects of the tradition which are not shared. And many of those have to do with the techniques and the practices, the meditation.
These meditational practices of the Kabbalists involve contemplating the divine aspects of God depicted in the Sphirot. Glory, eternity, beauty, justice, mercy, understanding, wisdom. By repeating the holy names of the Sphirot, it is said that the Kabbalist begins to draw in God's divine essences.
By meditating on the different divine names, what one is essentially doing is training one's mental focus to release the intellect from its being imprisoned in the body. When the Kabbalist comes to know the Sphirot, it's not a theoretical knowledge. It's a mystical knowledge, by which I mean that the Kabbalist is illuminated through this knowledge. He gains insight through this enlightenment. That idea is enhanced, of course, by the fact that the Sfirot themselves take the shape of a human form. So there is a correspondence also physically between the human body and the imagined body of God. So it's really a version of the old Delphic oracle, knowing thyself. Right? By coming to know God through these Sfirot, what the Kabbalists have always intended is that one comes to know oneself more deeply.
In Sufism, divine names are also used in the secret rites of zikr to draw the spirit of the mystic closer and closer to their God Allah.
Zikr, the repetition of the divine name, has to move from verbal enunciations of words to something that is linked far more to your essential being. Some Sufis, for example, will argue the goal is to link it to the rhythm of your heartbeat, so that as your heart beats, it is in fact repeating without words the same zikr that you began to recite in the initial stages of transformation.
Every name has a divine power in it that evokes that particular quality. So one of the names of God is Wadud, love. So when we call Ya Wadud, O love, that we are filled, we begin to be filled with the quality of that name.
And as one meditates through the names of God, one uses a set of beads in order to count off the names.
And the name has a powerful effect. Yeah, all divine names have powerful effect upon the human being. And it is even said that the entire creation is made up of the divine names. You might say the divine energies, vibrations of the names. But, whirling with each other and creating you might say, the form and the beauty of this universe.
There is no doubt that within the mystical tradition, the names of God have been used very much as a meditative technique and a way of attempting to develop spiritual power through using those particular names.
With the La ilaha illallah, as we're sitting in the zikr, as we begin the zikr, we move from our right side, our right shoulder, and we move our head, we go, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah. The Muhammadan Rasulullah we say inwardly, you don't hear it. So outwardly it's only La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. There's only one being, and that is what La ilaha illallah is saying. There is no, you might say, individual left to be reciting the zikr. It's Allah alone who is making zikr. Muhammadan Rasulullah.
In Kundalini Yoga, the chanting of divine names is interwoven with techniques of movement, breath, and meditation to form this powerful path of transcendence.
Kundalini Yoga is really a culmination of many different types of yoga. The use of it is to burn karmas. It's to bring us back to our reality, that we are not this body, we're not this physical form. We really are an embodiment of God. We are truth.
Yoga is a spiritual practice. It is not an exercise form to make the ego stronger. It's a spiritual practice to enable the soul to surrender the ego to God or to the divine source.
To yoga is to unite, is union. When you start connecting with your body, you start to see how your own experience with your body is really like, your own experience with infinity. We use asana practice, which is postures. We also use pranayama. Pranayama, breathing exercises are in Kundalini Yoga partnered with the asanas. So what we'll do in a typical Kundalini Yoga class is that we'll work all of these things. We usually start out by warming up and doing some pranayama, working with the breath. The breath is critical to yoga. It controls your mind. So when you can learn to control your breath, you can learn to control your mind.
Chanting every time before you do any kind of practice gives you an instant feedback as to where you're at in the progression of your practice. The source sound of all of this universe is Om. It's a vibration. So all things are not things, really. They're vibration. They're sound.
When you chant those sounds, that is one way of stimulating or awakening consciousness.
What is it all about? It's all about knowing who you really are. That identity which is eternal, beyond the body and the mind. So you have to expand your consciousness to perceive that.
Like the Kundalini energy found in the yogic traditions of Hindu and Sikh cultures, Taoist mystics have long known the power contained in the vital energy force of Qi to elevate their consciousness.
When you think about Qigong, you think about sort of three aspects of Qigong practice or Taiji practice in terms of how you're going to work with energy. First step is your awareness. The first idea when you're practicing is to become aware of this energetic experience. You then can move to the next step. You start with awareness, then you start with cultivation. A lot of what you're doing when you're doing Taiji Chuan is you're working with your balance, you're working with your energetic system, you're strengthening your spine, which even in terms of modern science, improves information transfer between your nervous system and your organs and your brain. And through the alignment of the body, you discover different kinds of energy pathways. And you begin to notice that there's a source for all this movement rather than just the movement. And this takes you into a different realm completely. So what you have is the path of man reflecting on himself. Not who am I as much as what am I.
Further along the mystic's path to the divine world, uncharted territories of consciousness must be crossed, where the boundaries between reality and imagination disappear. The mystic's path to the world of the divine can be a perilous journey that only a few dare to venture.
There's a very heightened sensitivity to the dangers of the enterprise and the consequent emphasis on secrecy as a result of fearing that engaging in the mystical path will lead to apostasy, will lead to insanity, may even lead to premature death.
If a person really does try to practice hesychia, silence, then they enter into an incredible inner spiritual turmoil. We believe the demons will tempt them.
My teachers felt that it was hypnotic, and that by going into the state of self-hypnosis, perhaps you opened yourself to lower or psychic or phantasmagorial elements that could come in.
Hallucinations, visions, manic phases that one will experience.
I mean, even the experience of union, as it is portrayed, the tropes of death. Right? Of course, the point is that through dying, through negating your finite self, you expand your consciousness. But that's a very disorienting experience for someone who is not ready to deal with it. because you lose all of the markers that we need in our everyday consciousness. Separating ourselves off from others, the sense of merging with this greater self. Right? You lose your own identity. And that could be very problematic for somebody who's not ready for it.
You don't just hop on the way and start walking the path. Walking the path means the struggle of walking on the path.
Each of us is burdened, and those are our psychological conflicts, emotional conflicts, depression, sadness, sense of alienation.
There is a war that needs to go on inside within us, internally, in order to be able to take the negative energy, which all of us have. But what we need to do in our challenge is to try to declare war on that negativity.
And it's a struggle. It's, that's what's called the holy battle, the jihad al-Akbar, the great battle. That's the one against the self. And that's the only one the Sufis really are involved in.
And this is our struggle in the spiritual life. But also this may be a blessing in the sense that we are allowed to work our way back into the consciousness of paradise. Not paradise as a place, but as a consciousness within our minds and hearts.
Within all the mystical traditions of the world is the shared belief that the key to paradise lay in the purity of the heart and mind of the mystic.
Clearly what you begin to see emerging in early Sufism is a sense that the world really is a prison in which the spirit has been trapped. And the reason one needs to develop spiritual practice is to help detach oneself from all of those human instinctive desires that continually embed you deeper and deeper into matter and the world, in order to be able to free your spirit to focus on really what should be its goal, which is union with the beloved, union with God.
Their thirst for the infinite leads the Sufi further along the path of God and deeper into the heart of their being.
Allah is inside the human heart. And the dervish path, guided by the sheikh, is really back to the heart. And there is the encounter with the Lord. We don't leave the self. We don't leave the self. We don't separate from the self. We simply purify the self so that the self becomes shining and full of light. This is our path. This is our goal, to come to that place, which is, you might say, beyond space and time, beyond individual self. So we're no longer even in the heart, what we might identify as the heart at that point. We're in the secret of the secret. And that's quite a journey.
Like the Muslim Sufis, the Christian hesychasts believe that purity of the heart opens the door to an experience of God.
The mind, which is the higher aspect of the soul, is to be brought into the heart.
The prophet Jeremiah in the Bible said the heart of a person is deep and desperately corrupt. So once you enter into the realm of the heart, and that would be an expression that we would use, that you find the place of the heart within you, the place where the saints say God testifies to himself. The first level is a kind of catharsis, purification. And everyone to some extent has to do this. But then we have the holy hesychasts, people in our tradition, who really got into this kind of, almost in a kind of technology, you see, how it happens, what you do, how you pay attention, how you breathe, how you relate to your body.
The technique of purifying the heart begins with the Jesus Prayer, which contains within it the power of transformation, though the act of prayer itself must move beyond the spoken word.
They would say that the word is most eloquent when he's silent, when he stops speaking. And even our theological tradition would claim that theology is ultimately silence. You pass beyond all words, all images, all concepts into the divine silence. But the claim was that they learned this through praying. They didn't learn this through thinking or reading the pages of the Bible or something. Their actual experience of silent prayer calling on the name of God. It's a way of speaking that you can't find human words for.
For the Jewish Kabbalists, purification also plays an essential role on the path of mysticism. Through intense meditational practices on the 10 Sefirot, the Kabbalist begins to tear down the walls that separates reality from imagination.
Contemplation of the Sefirot for the Kabbalist is attained through the imagination. So the imagination is portrayed, as it were, as a mirror. The ascetic practices, holding off on sexuality, curbing your appetite for food, all of that is to polish the imagination clean, so that in the imagination, the divine body can take shape.
The more that we can emulate those Sefirot, the more that we in our behavior can become a vessel for those Sefirot, the more united we will be in a very physical level with the highest of the spiritual planes.
The path of purification also finds its way into the practices of Qigong. Circulating the energy of Qi throughout their bodies, Taoist mystics cleanse themselves of the impurities that bind them to the material world.
Opening up to your own spirit, opening up to the divine wisdom that's in all of us, opening up to spirituality, really opening up one's heart, one's mind, one's energetic system can never be harmful.
This is the first step. You learn to get in touch with the energy. But then you come to the more, let's say, esoteric part of the practice, the real alchemy. And then you want to really change the energy. That's called the fusion practices.
Mastering the art of energy movement, the Taoist mystic enters into the secret method of fusion, refining and purifying the Qi energy, until the energy itself takes on a separate form.
Fusion was absolutely secret. It would be taught by Taoist monks in the mountains of China, and it would be taught to disciples who were carefully picked and carefully trained. What you are attempting to do in fusion is to create another body. And this body can exist outside your body. But the most mystical concept of the Taoists was creating what was called the immortal fetus. This was like giving birth to a baby that would live in the energy body and would be immortal.
In Kundalini Yoga, purification practices of the mind and body are also used to clear the path to enlightenment.
All of us know our truth when we really listen to what's going on inside. You have to listen to your heart, but it's very difficult for us to listen to it in a very noisy society, in a society that doesn't create space for it. And that's why meditation is so crucial in being able to live your path. We say that prayer is conversating with God. Meditating is listening to God.
Through deep meditation, the yogi awakens the Kundalini energy that is hidden within.
Well, Kundalini is, the creative Shakti power that's within all of us. It really powers the universe, but it is in us. And it lies mostly dormant. If it were completely dormant, we wouldn't be alive. It lies mostly dormant in our bodies, and it's represented as the coiled serpent at the base of the spine.
As the energy moves up the spine, it is said to purify the core of the mystic's being, opening up doorways of awareness called chakras.
Chakra means a level of perception. You, as an individual, are able to perceive reality in a more expanded way. Reality doesn't change, but your perception widens.
And as this snake awakens and rises up, The image is that through this gradual awakening, we come to know our true nature.
The goal of yoga is samadhi. Samadhi means ecstasy, or that blissful state of being, the true state of being.
That's the one thing about Kundalini Yoga that's so empowering, is to help people experience infinity within themselves.
Yoga is a practical method. We can talk and talk and talk, and we can exchange ideas. But if you really want to know something, you have the experience of it, and then you know it.
The belief that it is possible to experience the world of the divine in this lifetime has set many a sail on the path of mysticism, though the end of the path itself is never what it's thought to be.
Everything returns to the same source that it came from.
Where you begin, you end. It completes the circle.
Those who practice some form of silence and solitude and desire for God, in practically any culture on the planet, they end up with compassion, bodhisattva. They end up with love. They end up with gentleness. They end up with a sense of the unity of all things.
For those who follow the path of mysticism, purity of the heart and mind opens the doors to the hidden world of the divine, the consciousness of paradise. But in the final stages of transformation, the practices and techniques that has led the mystic to this point must be left behind to cleanse the consciousness of all traces of the finite world. As the end of the path nears, the holy divide that once separated the mystics from their ultimate destination begins to fall away.
You do not see otherness. There's just beingness. There's just existence. There's just love.
There is neither identity left, and in fact, the description of the divine is no longer personal. It isn't a personal God. It is simply oneness, stasis, and perfect peace. So you can't have love if there's only one reality that exists. You've, in a sense, moved beyond the duality that love requires to total identity and the merging of the I into the beloved.
And when the lover merges with the beloved, we say nothing is left. The lover disappears into the beloved. Only the beloved is left.
There is this union, this mystical union, where I am in the beloved and the beloved is in me, and the two become one. And we really, a human being is really deified. We use that expression, theosis. They really become divine by grace.
The idea is that there is one. You know, there is one creator. There is one. We are all one, ultimately.
All one experiences is oneness, or that one does not even experience anything. All that exists is the one.
There's a sense really in which you can not distinguish between God and human.
From the tribal shaman of ancient civilizations to today's soul seekers, mystics of the world have journeyed to the edge of reality and back again to experience the divine, often returning with a greater understanding of man's place in the cosmos.
An individual's spiritual transformation has an absolutely essential role for the survival of the cosmos.
We are a replication of the cosmos. Everything is within ourselves.
We tend to think that the universe is something that we have to go out to sort of see that it has no ends. But you can go the other way and find out it has no end either.
Our actions, our deeds, our mitzvot have cosmic repercussions.
Everything that we do affects the universe. Whatever we say, if we say something really lovely about someone, that is infinite. That's been put out into the universe, it's there, and it lives on forever. And it's really important for us to realize that our actions really do live on infinitely.
When a person really does love with the love with which God loves us, which is the commandment for Christians, commune with God, in that person the whole of creation is saved.
As long as there's one person sincerely affirming the divine reality and divine unity, the entire creation will continue to exist.